everybody. This is Stephen Fenley with Microsoft. I'm your Azure specialist, and I'm here with James Brimmer from VMware, and he is the Azure VMware Solutions Specialist for all of Canada. So, James, why don't you just tell us real quick about yourself, and then let's jump into the conversation. What is Azure VMware Solutions?
So just to introduce myself, I've been with VMware now for 8 years, quite some time. As we move into the public hyperscaler market, we want to figure out ways to obviously move VMware or VMs up into the cloud as well. So what Azure VMware Solution is the ability to instantiate an SDDC in Azure on bare metal. It is our HCI stack, so it's vSphere, vCenter, NSX, vSAN, all up in Azure, running as a host. So very similar to how you'd run it on-prem.
What's special about it? Why would a customer be thinking about making this move into Azure?
So the way we think about it is the fastest, most economical way to move workloads into Azure, especially VMware workloads. We see a lot of reduced costs and into performance risk with on-demand hosts. So you have the ability to not only put up your workloads into Azure on the host, but you have the ability to expand very rapidly if you have the requirement to do so. The nice part about this for our customers, there's no reskilling required. It's exactly the same as on-prem, just in Azure. We have the ability to move it over very quickly using HCX. It's the same management and monitoring tools you use today, all the templates, workflows, and it's as easy as a vMotion up into Azure. So very quick and lift and shift up into the cloud without having to refactor any of the applications or rebuild or reskill on anything.
Yeah, and the easy of shifting this into Azure, because it's all VMware from one to the other. The quickness of that makes perfect sense to me. What about the total cost of ownership? Because normally when I'm talking to people coming into Azure, the ways I'm saving them money is I am, making sure we're not using more hardware than we need to. We're not overbuying. We're optimizing workloads, running them efficiently because we can always scale them as needed. We're modernizing things to use more platform services so that that reduces costs as well because of the efficiency gains with containerization on different levels. And so where is the cost savings coming from in a TCO comparison to a traditional model?
Right. So as we look at it, like a TCO over 3 years or so, we see approximately about 30% greater TCO or better TCO with the AVS versus a native solution. And a lot of that comes from the migration cost. So the cost to refactor that application, the time it takes to refactor it, and the time it takes to test it, and all the risk associated with those, that's eliminated using AVS.
Okay.
In terms of some functional equivalency software that needs to be acquired in order to have the VMwares or the Azure VMs work the same way as they would with AVS, there's a gap there. I mean, there is a cost that's associated with that. And simply put, once we do put things up in Azure, at least we get you out of the data center. You're ready to go. If you need to, either there's kind of a couple options at that point. You can stay on AVS, or you can start to use some of those services you said to help make those workloads a little bit more modern or a little bit more functional or whatever. Or you can actually modernize once you're in the cloud to native while keeping everything very close. So you can have low latency, ease of use, and ease of connectivity.
So a lot of people who are probably watching this right now, they are on VMware. They love VMware. They don't plan on leaving VMware. Why move it into Azure, though, from a cost perspective over on-premise? Like, where did those cost savings come from?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the savings are, we just want to get out of the data center. I mean, there's data center evacuations. Also, what if you need to expand? So right now we have supply shortages of hardware. It's just, it's pretty commonplace. I don't see it going away anytime soon. At some point, in the future, yeah, it's going to level out. But as of right now, if you need to expand and start to grow even that top line revenue through some of your IT applications or workloads, you can do that by moving to AVS. You have that ability to burst that expansion, and you're only paying for what you need versus on-prem, where you need to size for your high water mark, but plus a little bit more.
Yeah.
So with AVS, you can run a little bit hotter. So where you might see like a 60% utilization on-prem, you can get to an 85, 90% utilization in AVS because we do have that ability to simply move a host if it fails. We can add another one within, a few hours very quickly. Whereas if you had tried to do that on-prem, you have to order the hardware, track and stack it, and make sure that it's all functional, which is months at a time. So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So talk to me about the hybrid DC, because anytime we do a data center migration into Azure, very, rarely are they truly zero data center migrations, into Azure where you get completely rid of on-premise items, right? So there has to be some advantages to having VMware as a holistic solution across both environments.
sure. So the greatest advantage is actually it's the same platform. So it's the same. I can move workloads back and forth as I see fit. We use a product called HCX that is included with ABS to do the first migration. But the nice part about that is it's bidirectional. So if you need to
Okay.
burst into the cloud for a little bit, you migrate it with HCX, do whatever you need to do on-prem to fix that, and then you can actually drive it back if you need to, if you want to. Uh, but really, in terms of the hybridity, you have, the connectivity obviously comes into play. So, things like ExpressRoute or Global Reach, or even just using VPN, depending on what that workload requires. There is the ability to obviously utilize on-prem data in a cloud environment as well, or vice versa. So, it offers a lot of flexibility and agility to do what you need to do. It really is workload dependent, though, on that.
Yeah. Another big advantage of Azure is some of the additional services, the bells and whistles that you get by putting your stuff in Azure that you can't replicate. The technology isn't there if you do it on your own on premise.
Mhm.
And so, what is the story there with AVS? Do you get the best of both worlds that way?
Absolutely. So ABS is a native service. It's a native Azure service. It's not, some third party built on. It is it has access as if it's a full on native service to those services. So
Mhm.
uh, now those don't translate not necessarily into the on-prem version, but you can utilize those for ABS as well. And that's really where it goes back to modernizing that application, or renovating it a little bit, or putting lipstick on it in a little white and other terms, but making sure that you can actually just make it better using those services.
Yeah. What are some other, hot topics on this conversation? What are some other things some of our managed accounts here that are watching this are going to want to hear on this?
Yeah, so we do hear a lot of customers come to us around DR. It's definitely a hot topic in terms of data centers that were being not maintained or not attended to during COVID because we couldn't get in the building, or people weren't allowed to go on site. Having that ability to do it virtually and making sure that we can move up there, but also using some other products that are available out there like Zerto or JetStream, you can have a very, very small footprint or pilot light. And then when you need to, you can hydrate everything and make it your disaster recovery scenario. So you don't have to have a full on disaster recovery facility. We also obviously fully integrated with SRM. So if you're an SRM customer today with VMware, we can utilize that. So you can change your colo facility or your data center facility into an ABS and only pay for what actually you need versus having it just sit there
Right.
gaining dust basically.
Right. Yeah. So that's a huge advantage. I mean, some of the technology that's there available, paying for what you need is such a huge cost savings exercise. So with AVS, what would be some of the support that they get from, your VMware teams if they wanted to even just start exploring this, crunching numbers,
Sure.
seeing, I don't know, seeing what some of the it would look like. It's always different when you on paper talking to 100 people
Yeah.
versus get into the nitty gritty of someone's specifics that they want to actually validate.
Sure. So I will say that AVS is a fully supported sold by solution by Microsoft. So your support channel would actually go through Microsoft to start once you're in the solution. Uh, However, VMware and Microsoft, surprisingly, from the past we used to be major competitors. Now we are major partners as well. So we work hand in hand. I work with Stephen as well as the other Azure reps out there to really help you understand both from a VMware perspective and a Microsoft perspective what you need to do. We have technical people behind us with our global back belt teams that work hand in hand. They all have training on AVS, but some are definitely better with Azure and some are definitely better with the VMware side. So you have that that ability to get the best of both worlds and get the actual full picture. When it gets into actually supporting a production environment, the first calls would go through Microsoft, but once that gets to a level where we've identified it being somewhat of a VMware issue, they would then contact VMware on your behalf, and we would go through that perspective. But there's a lot of programs available to help you get this get to AVS and get to Azure. It's just a matter of exploring that and really defining what that TCO might be and where and what workloads might make sense for you.
Yeah, I know, we're talking to all managed Microsoft accounts here, so I would definitely have the opportunity to sponsor, funding requests and other things, even, potentially bringing in some other expert resources as we do this as well. As far as, do you guys also typically work with uh, other other Microsoft partners that help in this journey as well, or does it typically end up being directly just with VMware and Microsoft?
No, there are partners as well. So, a couple of partners that are available. There's a number that do cross over with both being VMware experts and Microsoft experts. So obviously we concentrate on those first, as they just have the skills to actually do this.
Yep.
And if we run into an issue, we have, some sort of ability to help them. But to be quite honest, there is, both from a Microsoft perspective and a VMware perspective, where they're helping the partner so that if they run into anything or have questions, we do help them out and make sure that they have this, in the bag for everybody.
Yeah. When is for certain customers, there's going to be a best time to be thinking about making this move? Is it typically when hardware refreshes come, or what are other considerations they should be thinking about AVS?
Yeah, I see either like a data center, renewal needs to come up, either whether it be a hardware refresh or, a colo facility that you lease, a data center lease that might come up. Usually we want to look at least, 6 months in advance of when that's due so that we can actually kind of make a plan, make sure that we get out of that before it does come up. Um, ELAs from VMware, that's a really big thing as well. If you have an ELA coming up, within the next 12 months, it makes sense to even take a look at this because there are levers on the other side of that we can help pull, that make that a little bit more palatable, so that there's not a double charge or anything like that, or a perceived double charge of any licensing. And then just making sure everything's compliant with all your agreements. It's pretty easy. And I've had customers come to me in every stage of all of these. So there's no specific golden time that makes it shine, but generally, if there is a compelling event within the next 6 to 12 months of either one of those, that's a great time to start looking at it.
Okay. Another thing that comes to mind when we're thinking about AVS also, I know one of the advantage of moving stuff into the traditional IaaS on Azure is that, if I have some tools running on like a D2 VM, and I can pretty easily upgrade to a D5, that has newer hardware, right? And I can keep at my choosing, I can keep that underlying hardware fresh and newer technology, more whatever, faster CPUs, all those type of things that can give some performance increases. What does that look like on AVS as far as staying fresh with the underlying hardware?
Yeah, so AVS from a standpoint, it's basically a managed service by Microsoft all the way up until vSphere. So vSphere up is managed by the customer. Um, so Microsoft changes out all that hardware on a life cycle that they have. It is very fresh, I believe. It's not obviously day zero of new hardware is out, we can go switch it out, but we see a very good maybe N-1 hardware refresh there. So it's
Awesome.
been excellent so far, and the performance has been you know, fantastic, as well as it's architected and sized properly.
Okay. When you guys do some of the total cost of ownership comparisons and you're comparing, I'm just thinking of customers that are getting close to a hardware refresh and are thinking about some of this. What's the life cycle that you guys compare it to with some of these numbers that you're kind of referencing today with like the 28% or 30% cheaper than for total cost of ownership?
We do it over a 3-year comparison.
3 year.
So
Okay.
yeah, you run, a lot of people run their hardware a lot longer than that, up to 5 years, but we do it for 3 years to keep everything equivalent.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds
And we'd be
good.
happy to work with whatever timelines the customer is looking at. Uh, so
Mhm.
we have a full-on cloud economics team, as well as Microsoft has their assessment team as well. We do work together in those teams to make sure everything's being captured, but also everything's being explained in relative terms to how you operate.
Yeah, and then I know some of our customers are going to be familiar with some of the extended support for end of support for Windows or SQL and their various life cycles. Do they get some of that benefits with AVS also?
Yeah, so if you move those workloads into AVS, you do benefit from the 3 years extended support that's offered, as well as you get the hybrid benefits of bringing your Windows and SQL Server licenses along with you. So
Yeah,
as long as those are upgraded or at that level, they can operate both, I believe, on-prem and in the cloud simultaneously. So
yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, the great thing about VMware is, people are familiar with it. They love it. It just works. It sells itself in many ways. So I think the joint effort here and do it on Azure is pretty cool. That's an option. So any parting words that you'd want to say to our managed accounts?
not really. I think this is a wonderful partnership that we have with Microsoft and VMware. It's kind of one of the first of its kind, at least in my career. That's been two major players within your data center that are coming together to form a solution. I really think that partnership it's going to grow, and not only grow within just the size of how much Azure we're consuming, but also in terms of the capabilities of what's available. So other VMware products will be available within Azure. There already is, vRealize or Tanzu or Horizon as well. So all those other products are going to be tied into
Mhm.
this, and it's just we're trying to make it as easy as possible to move to the cloud for our customers, our joint customers.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this. And to my managed accounts, we'd love to make the connection and talk more in depth on a personal level. So don't be afraid to reach out to me, and we'll rally the troops and see how we can support your journey.